Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. A direct link for the group is in the YouTube description section. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018. Come and give us a try sometime.
My schizophrenia would have started very early in my life, as it does with most people. And the simple fact is, it was something beyond my control. There was nothing I could have done about it. Most schizophrenics have ancestors or relations with mental disorders. In my own case, my own mental problems may be traced back to my great-grandfather, Kray, who was a gypsy and a cattle dealer from Bermondsey and died in Claybury Madhouse. My grandfather's brother, who they called Dewey, also died there. I have traced back our family roots a long way, and my earliest ancestors probably came from Austria. Even today, the surname Kray is quite common in the Salzburg area, but it does seem that the family have had a lot of mental problems over the years, although both my parents were very sane and normal people. But what causes schizophrenia? I have read up on it, and a child can be a schizophrenic even before it is born. Something goes wrong in the chemistry of a baby's body, even when it is still inside its mother, but the problems don't show up until a lot later. You can tell kids who may be schizophrenic kids who are backward, or precocious, or daydreamers, or kids who fly into tempers. I wasn't backward, but I suppose I always had a bit of a temper on me. I still do, but I can usually control it with willpower and drugs. I know about my drugs, and I know about the ways in which they help me. I take Stemitol capsules 4 times a day to quieten my nerves. I also take Disipol, which is for the side effects caused by the Stemitol, which sometimes makes my limbs shake and difficult to control. Every fortnight I have an injection of Modicate, which is a drug specifically to curb the symptoms of schizophrenia. It stops the bad dreams and the depressions. What none of them can cure, what nothing can cure, when I'm going into one, is the terrible feeling of loneliness. You see, drugs can only do so much. The most important thing for a mentally ill person is their peace of mind. Some of the poor people who suffer from mental illness never have peace of mind. They suffer in their minds all their lives. They are tormented souls. There are some terrible cases here at Broadmoor, men and women who are so badly disturbed in their minds that they never recover. These people deserve pity and understanding, not condemnation. That's why patients in Broadmoor rarely gang up on other patients, why even men like Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, are relatively safe here, which they wouldn't be in a prison. Because the patients here know that other patients cannot help the things they have done. Some people do get better, some regain such control over their own minds that they are released. I like to think I am among those winning the battle against this illness, but it's a long and lonely road. Patients can see for themselves how well or how badly they are doing. Every few years, each one goes before a mental health tribunal, which decides how well he or she is progressing and whether the patient is in a state of mind where freedom or a change of hospital would be suitable. That hasn't happened to me yet, but I know that things are getting better. I'll tell you why. When I had a review in June 1983, it wasn't good. Dr. D. Tidmarsh, who was my consultant psychiatrist, wrote this: Ronald Kray is a chronic schizophrenic. In what for him is the unstressful environment of Broadmoor, his illness does not become florid and its symptoms are more or less controlled by medication. I am sure, however, that he would relapse if he were under stress, as he would be if he were returned to prison. As he is the first to admit, he can no longer stand the pace of prison or, I believe, the competition from younger prisoners. And in that environment, I am sure he would decompensate rapidly with the risk of further violence. Like I say, not a great report, but when I went before the review tribunal in 1991, this is what they said. Dr. Ferris reported well upon this patient, and it is clear that his psychotic condition is now well controlled by medication and by the patient's own insight into any early onset of his illness. I still didn't get freedom, of course, or even a move to a softer hospital, but that to me was a good report and proof to me that I do understand my own mind better than I ever did. All the patients here get visits and checks from social workers, and they put in their own reports on us. I have managed to get hold of a recent report on me by a senior social worker called Mrs. Carol Parkinson. She said about me, Mr. Kray's wife, Kate, visits her husband on a regular basis and offers him support. Mr. Kray also has a considerable number of friends who write and visit. Mr. Kray has recently transferred to a new ward in the hospital where he seems to have settled in well. He works 4 mornings each week in the kitchen gardens and spends the rest of his time listening to music or reading on the wards. When eventually discharged, Mr. Kray hopes to live with his wife in a house in the country. He presently requires regular medication to control the symptoms of mental illness, and it would therefore seem in his best clinical interest to remain in Broadmoor for the foreseeable future. So I know from that I am still going to be here for some time, maybe forever. That doesn't worry me. But I would like to get out one day, go and live in the country and travel to places like India and Africa. I have had a premonition that I won't ever be set free, a very real premonition. But on the other hand, one of the doctors here told a friend of mine that I could be set free one day. I just don't know. I will never forget the day I came to Broadmoor, because no patient ever does. It was a lovely sunny day in 1979, and I thought the sunshine was a good omen. I couldn't wait to get here. When they threw me out of Parkhurst, it was one of the happiest days of my life. They brought me here in a van with 5 screws. I remember we came over on the ferry from Ryde to Portsmouth, me stuck in the prison van all the way, of course. And when we got to Portsmouth, there was a screw from Parkhurst on the harbour side waiting to travel back to the Isle of Wight. The driver of the prison van stopped to talk to this screw, and I heard the screw say, "Who have you got in there then? Another fucking geriatric." They all had a good laugh about that, but I thought it was me who was having the last laugh. I was getting away from Parkhurst. They were stuck with the God-forsaken place. I remember arriving here. I can remember the van driving off the main road into what seemed to be a big park. Then through the tiny window in the side of the van, I saw a big sign on a whiteboard, Broadmoor Special Hospital, private property. We drove up a hill, which seemed to get steeper and steeper. There were some beautiful tall trees, pine trees. Right at the top of the hill, it seemed to get dark, like the trees were closing in, and then I saw the hospital for the first time. It was big and silent, depressing to be honest. All dark red bricks and high walls. Nowadays, they tell me the hospital has a smart entrance hall, but when I came here, none of that existed. We drove through 2 huge wooden doors and then through some giant padlocked gates into the main courtyard. It was real quiet, a bit spooky, and there seemed to be no one around, just big blocks, the hospital wards, all around the courtyard. I was taken to what they call the admission ward and met by some nurses and a social worker. I was weighed and my height was measured, and then I was told to get into a bath. The male nurses, the screws, stood watching me all the time. The heavy atmosphere and the staff presence is deliberate. It's designed to have a psychological effect of intimidation on potentially troublesome patients. It works. After my bath, I was given a cup of tea and locked up in a bare room about 9 feet long and 6 feet wide, with just a mattress on the floor and some bedding. There was a big wooden shutter across the window, so there was no light, only the electric light bulb, which was never turned off. Next to the door was a slit through which the staff could stand and watch you. An hour before the night staff came on duty, I was unlocked and given a cigarette, and they told me what would happen to me over the next few weeks. They told me that the first few days and weeks at Broadmoor are the most difficult for every patient, but how he reacted to them would affect his whole future in the hospital. I remembered Nobby Clark's words, "If you behave yourself, it's heaven. If you don't behave yourself, it's hell." The admission floor was on the bottom of Somerset House, where I eventually finished up living for many years. Everyone has to come through the admission ward. The daily routine here was weird and hard to get used to. In the morning, we were unlocked at 7 o'clock. We slopped out, got rid of our own urine and excrement, our own mess from the night before, then had a wash and a shave, and had to line up while we waited for the razors to be counted. They weren't taking any chances because a lot of patients have suicidal tendencies. When this was over, I and the other new arrivals went into the day room, where we just sat all day until 9 o'clock at night. Again, the system is designed to put you under psychological pressure so the staff can assess how you react. Make a wrong move and life would be harder in the future. The rooms, like all the buildings here in those days, were drab and depressing, relics from another age. They should all have been condemned years ago. They were all like poorhouses. To use the toilet, you had to be escorted there and back by a screw who stood and waited for you outside the cubicle and stuck his head over the top if he thought you were taking too long. If you had a bath, you were given 6 inches of water in case you tried to drown yourself. And the screws, the nurses, were watching all the time. It was humiliating. In the day room, there were 5 rows of chairs across the room and a television set at the end. Down the side of the room was a line of blue chairs where the staff sat and watched our every move. They were there as well to listen to our conversations, but no one said much, so that was a waste of time. Also in the day room was a small table and chair where you could write letters and a small snooker table. That's all. That was to be my life for the next 3 months. Just off the day room was the dining hall, and the thing that surprised me was the food was not bad. Plain, simple food like that in hospital, but not bad. And we had china cups and proper knives and forks. The food was better than in prison, where we never had proper knives and forks. Breakfast was at 8, lunch at 12, tea at 5. After every meal, all the knives and forks were counted, for obvious reasons, before we were moved back into the day room. A few weeks on, after washing and breakfast, I was given a few odd jobs to do, and I just dragged the jobs out as long as I could, made them last as long as possible, to cut down the boredom of the endless days doing nothing. During those early weeks and months, you are seen by an endless stream of doctors, psychologists, education officers and social workers, and assessed by them all. The simple basic rules of the hospital are explained to you. Behave yourself and you will get privileges, a better room in a softer block, the freedom to work where you want, the use of a radio. Misbehave and you are in bother, serious bother. You will be put in solitary confinement in Norfolk House, the punishment block. Word had gone round about Norfolk House, the House of Correction, as some members of the staff cynically call it. The hospital prefers to call it the intensive care unit. Call it what you want, it's a bad place to be. It is still the most feared part of the hospital. It looks and is a frightening place. There are rumours about Norfolk House, but I have no proof of anyone being physically abused in there, or being abused with drugs, as others have claimed. But the psychological pressure and intimidation inside that building has to be experienced to be realised. I believe that you could go in there sane and come out mad. The rules are simple. Attack another patient and you will get at least 48 hours in solitary. Attack a nurse and you will get at least a week. In the old days, patients could spend weeks, months, even years in Norfolk House. Some, it's said, never came out again. Only once in the early days did I step out of line, and they put me into Norfolk House for 5 months. I started getting into fights with screws. I was silly. After that, I chose a more sensible path, and I have not been back since. Norfolk House is ugly. From behind its barred windows you can hear the cries of the patients, cries of anguish, the torment of pain. Not physical pain, but something far worse, mental agony. I got through my first 3 months on the admission ward and was then taken to Somerset House, or Block C as it was called in those days. This was a total contrast to what I had just experienced. Somerset House had its own rules, ward policies and regulations of course, but it was known as one of the friendlier houses in the hospital, and I soon settled into it. My new life had begun, and I began to adapt to it. Half the population of Broadmoor could be discharged. The problem is knowing which half. The story of Broadmoor is as complex and controversial as the place itself. Only when you study its past do you realize why it is the way it is today. Did you know, for example, that Broadmoor was originally built because of a madman with a gun and a king of England who later became mad? As Michael Caine might say, not many people know that. I know as much as anyone about this place. But then, I suppose I ought to. I started to learn about the hospital from a book in the library here. It is called Broadmoor, A History of Criminal Lunacy and Its Problems, and it was written in the early 1950s by a man called Ralph Partridge. A lot of the book has become out of date in the past 40 years, of course, and Partridge sounds like a bit of a goody-goody, trying to paint the sort of picture of Broadmoor that he knew the authorities would like. But it was a starting point, with government and health service documents, some of which I shouldn't have seen, newspapers, photographs and conversations with older patients and staff at the hospital. In my search for the real Broadmoor, one thing you have to come to terms with very early here is this. You no longer have any rights or powers. You are a surname and a number. You live by rules and regulations, other people's, and you have to get along with the patients around you, all of them. even those you hate. Normally in prison, grasses, ponces, sex offenders and people like that are avoided. If they cause any problems at all, they are beaten or cut. Here in Broadmoor, it doesn't happen like that. You have to accept that no matter how bad a person may be, and no matter how horrendous the crime they have committed, if they are here, it is because they suffer from some sort of psychological disorder. In other words, what they have done is beyond their control. I don't like mixing with such people, but I have to put up with it. I try and avoid them. I have never liked sex offenders or men who have hurt old people or children, so I let it be known that these men should stay away from me. They get the message. Everyone here thinks about freedom, though it doesn't worry me too much, but I still go through the same process as everyone else. Every 3 years you have a compulsory tribunal. The process is very simple. You get your own medical officer's report, your own independent doctor's report, and your social worker's report. You can be represented by a solicitor, but I don't bother. I know they won't let me out, not yet. The tribunal is made up of a judge, a doctor, and what they call a lay person, a member of the public. But you learn early on in your time here that very few people are discharged by a tribunal. The only real way out for a Section 65 patient, a convicted murderer, is if your psychiatrist here is convinced you are fit to be discharged, and if he can then persuade the Home Secretary. Only then will a patient like me be released. Thank you for listening. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I will see you again in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.